The planet is on a healing path from coronavirus. Vaccination against COVID-19 has begun around the world. The best virologists promise to bring people back to normal reality. What's happening now in different countries? Where quarantine has become a way of life? When can we breathe again without masks? All this in the Stop COVID program. A new unknown and even more dangerous strain of coronavirus, 300,000 infections per day in an unprecedented catastrophic epidemiological situation. For several weeks now, the world has been talking exclusively about India. A sharp outbreak of COVID-19 happened there in the middle of last month. India has never enjoyed outstanding sanitation. The virus didn't change anything. People continued the pilgrimage to the sacred Ganges River, neglected masks, and ignored the social distance. The natural consequences followed. A new wave of infection swept the country, even despite the vaccination. Although India is one of the largest suppliers of vaccine in the world, its population is getting the vaccine rather slowly. The situation is worsened by the fact that a new mutation of the virus has occurred in India, and this strain, according to preliminary data, is extremely resistant to antibodies that are produced after vaccination. The Indian variety of COVID-19 has already been registered in almost 1,000 of laboratories around the world.
Вот здесь храм ситхов, и вот однажды вечером я наблюдала картину.
Here's the temple of the Siddhas, and one evening I saw how people were giving food to poor children. They took food and ate it with their hands. They didn't even wash their hands before eating. Of course, with this attitude, the infection would spread more easily.
Перед едой, то есть, конечно, с таким отношением легче зараза переносится.
The Indian capital has become the epicenter of coronavirus infection worldwide over the past month. Every day, one news is worse than another. More than 300,000 infections per day, 4,000 deaths per night. Although back in March, life in New Delhi almost returned to a pre-COVID state, people even stopped wearing masks. In a city with a population of more than 20 million, it's physically impossible to keep the necessary social distance and comply with sanitary standards. This is also contrary to the foundations of life and the customs of the country.
Масочный режим соблюдают через раз, то есть не все. Вот, например, идет сейчас мать.
People barely follow the rules of wearing the masks. For example, see, there is a boy, he is without a mask. And at the moment, it's the hottest month. There is not enough air even without a coronavirus infection. It's hard to breathe.
Хватает даже и без коронавирусной инфекции. Дышать тяжело.
It's especially hard to breathe in hospitals. There are not enough free beds. They're already made up one after another. There are not enough medicines, artificial lung ventilation devices, and just oxygen. The situation is especially aggravated by panic, and as a result, a man-made stir around any drugs.
Не сразу поняла, что происходит.
I didn't immediately understand what was happening. This is a line with tanks. People are standing in line to fill their tanks with oxygen, to apparently have the opportunity to use them at home.
Иметь возможность, видимо, дома у себя пользоваться.
Insects do die, and we, the Ayurvedic physicians, are feeling so helpless because we feel that we can do much better. We can have an edge over this pandemic, but people, if government is not trusting its researches, who will trust?
Every day, long queues line up at the vaccination centers in the capital, although the authorities warn that there is not enough drug for everyone. To date, 150 million people have already received the first dose in the country. About 30 million have been fully vaccinated. The figures are impressive, but not for India. The total population of the country exceeds 1,300,000,000 people. Doctors, on the other hand, think that the country shouldn't concentrate solely on vaccination and try alternative medicine, which the country is so famous for.
All over the world, the situation is really difficult. But I believe that with the blessings of Ayurveda, we can definitely take a lead over it if we are allowed to do. See, Ayurveda, according to Indian history, is ages-old medicine therapy.
The bodies of coronavirus victims are burned in the open. With this headline, over the past month, hundreds of different news articles have been published around the world, although few people specify that any cremation in the country took place and is still taking place this way. Grief and tears reigned in crematoriums even before COVID-19. More people were frightened by the dead who were allegedly flowing down the Ganges River. Panic grew at the speed of light. There are a lot of videos about India, which say that people are dying and corpses are floating in the river. We are now in Rishikesh. We are on the Ghats where, in fact, the burning process takes place, since in India people are not buried but cremated. We are at the cremation site. No one floats in the river, people are burned as usual. There is no such thing as someone dying on the streets. Yes, maybe there are a couple of more bonfires, but why is this happening? Because it's incredibly hot in India and the air is very dry. There is a lot of dust. What can we say about people who live in boxes, who live on the street? Those who smoke have sore lungs. They can die simply from this dryness because they start to cough. People are dying because they're scared. They have no information about the coronavirus. When they say on TV or there is a rumor that everyone is dying from the virus, a person thinks, oh my God, I probably have some kind of terrible virus. I'm going to die now. And then he starts having a panic attack. The city of Rishikesh is located on the Ganges River in the foothills of Tibet. A bigger harm to people is caused not by the disease itself, but by how it is interpreted far beyond the borders of India. In India, we see two paradoxical realities that run in parallel. One reality is the one that surrounds us. It is wonderful weather, wonderful climate, the presence of beautiful nature near the Ganges in the Himalayas, and the other reality is news. In one of the southernmost states, a favorite place for tourists, Goa, life is radically different from the capital. There is quarantine, but it doesn't seem to exist, although large non-grocery stores are closed. A year ago, everything was different here. You could go out to buy food only once a week, and you weren't allowed to go for a walk along the embankment. Indians who are accustomed to a slower-paced life, who are accustomed to the fact that everything in their life happens in about the same way, their reaction to the lockdown was strange. At first, they were simply in panic. They cursed all the whites because they firmly believed that it was we who brought them COVID-19. It was a little harsh at first. We had some strict rules. We weren't allowed to leave the house. Well, everyone was very scared, and it had a strong effect. Daria has been living in Goa for several years. She does yoga. She's grateful that she's going through the pandemic right here on the ocean coast. Despite the low incidence in Goa, the outbreak of COVID-19 in other regions of the country is not diminished or ignored. At the same time, they say that May has always claimed the lives of many people. We must remember that seasons are changing and it's the hottest time of the year at the moment. People are dying from a very large number of infections, which at this time of year in India are in a full swing. While some countries are sending medical assistance to India, others in a hurry to stop any air communication with the country. Thus, the Australian government has banned even its own citizens from returning from India. Violation of the ban faces a fine of $25,000 to $50,000. One may even face imprisonment for 5 years. In the near future, India plans to first neutralize panic in order to treat seriously ill patients, as well as to vaccinate another 100 million people by midsummer. Chile is one of the most vaccinated countries in the entire world. Only Israel and the United Arab Emirates are ahead of it in terms of vaccination rates. The first dose has already been received by half of all its citizens. By June, the population was promised to lead a life in a new normalcy. That's how the government called the return to pre-COVID state for the country. However, instead of this, a new, much stronger outbreak of coronavirus occurred. April crushed us all with the fact that Santiago was closed for total quarantine. They said that they won't sell anything non-essential. Among all the countries of the American continent from the very beginning of the pandemic, Chile was distinguished by simply draconian restrictive measures. The government has developed a step-by-step system consisting of different phases of bans. For most of the past year, Chileans have lived in the first phase of the most stringent rules.
Что такое локдаун по-чилийски? Это два пропуска.
How does a Chilean lockdown look like? 2 permit passes to the shops a week. If you have an appointment with a doctor or need to get a test, you can get an additional pass. The phase 1 is a total lockdown, and you're allowed to have 2 passes. When we have a second phase, we can go out to the city where shops and hair salons are open, but restaurants do not work. In the third phase, restaurants are open, but naturally with restrictions, with masks, with temperature measurements, and everyone always wears masks. Always, and everyone wears masks.
С масками, с замерами температуры. И всегда все ходят в масках. Всегда и все ходят в масках.
You can leave the house on lockdown only twice a week. Each pass is issued online and only for 2 hours. Only grocery stores are open. Schools and universities have completely switched to distance learning, the level of which has deteriorated sharply. It's prohibited to move between regions of the country, even more so going abroad.
5 апреля в стране снова ввели тотальный локдаун, тотальный карантин.
On April 5th, a total lockdown was again introduced in the country, total quarantine. It's forbidden for tourists to enter the country, which was opened on November 24th last year. And it's forbidden to fly out of the country for Chilean citizens and residents. For example, despite the fact that I have a passport of the Russian Federation and I'm a resident of Chile, in order to fly out of the country, I need to show documents at the airport confirming that I have the right to fly.
Нужно показать в аэропорту документы, подтверждающие свои права на вылет.
Chileans are vaccinated for free. Vaccination centers have been opened in parks, gyms, and hospitals. The drugs are of American, British, Swedish, and Chinese origin. It was the latter the country's authorities believed that caused a new outbreak of the coronavirus. Scientists have shown that the Chinese vaccination guarantees immunity against illness in only half of the cases. In addition, most of the infections are no longer the COVID that raged a year ago, but its mutations. The Brazilian and British strains both are much more aggressive, affecting even young adults.
Цены взлетели абсолютно на все.
Prices have skyrocketed on absolutely everything from food to real estate, and since October last year, there have been restrictions on postage between Chile and Russia.
На почтовые отправления.
Хотя иногда есть ощущение вот именно того, что...
Although sometimes there is a feeling that you do not live in Chile, you don't live in Latin America. You live in your own apartment, and your world is very limited by all this, by these 4 walls. And it's a little depressing.
И это немножечко, время от времени угнетает.
In the Chilean summer, this is from December to February, people were given 1 vacation permit. The authorities are now preparing to move on to the next softer phase of restrictive measures. They are going to open shops, allow its residents to move freely around the city, at least on weekdays.
Это будет означать, что с понедельника...
This will mean that from Monday to Friday we can move freely in the city until curfew, but the weekend we will spend still in quarantine. On weekends we're given 1 permit for 2 hours if we urgently need to go somewhere.
Срочно куда-то выехать.
In the next few months, Chile plans to complete the vaccination of the population over 18 years old, yet it's not known when the country will be opened for entry and exit, even in advance. European countries are gradually opening the borders. They're preparing for the summer season. True, the EU will accept tourists for the summer only if one has a special document, the green passports that are being introduced in the old world at the moment. The electronic application will tell whether a person received the vaccine, when he passed the PCR test, what was the result, and whether he has antibodies. Many countries, meanwhile, announced that they are ready to accept all vaccinated arrivals without unnecessary checks and tests. Over the past year, while the countries that have long established themselves as major tourist destinations were in lockdown, their new strong competition appeared. Less trivial and more interesting places are now open to travelers in Africa. Surprisingly, some countries have simply bypassed the coronavirus, even despite the poor living conditions. One of them was the small state of Benin. Benin is a small West African country with a population of 12 million. Tourists are not familiar with this destination yet when compared with South Africa, Kenya, or Tanzania, although there are also safaris that will take your breath away. Every year you can see the Voodoo Festival. And enjoy the endless ocean. But the main thing is that the country is almost completely free from coronavirus. Is there no longer coronavirus in the country? No, you see, there is no mask on my face, that's it. We don't have COVID anymore.
Паники по поводу ковида в нашей стране, в Бенине, не было. У нас все как-то так...
There was no panic about COVID in our country. Everything went so calmly and smoothly. When there was the first wave and the peak, of course, schools, churches, nightclubs, bars, karaoke, and universities were closed. It lasted from April to June. And by July, August, the churches were open. In September, all schools, with no exception, were open. This means that a total of 7,800 cases of COVID infection have been registered so far, of which 7,550 have been approximately cured.
Регистрировано 7800 случаев ковида, из которых 7550 примерно вылечено.
To contain the wave of coronavirus, according to the locals, was possible thanks to the isolation of the infected. A hospital was opened in the center of the country where COVID patients from all over Benin were treated. There was no way to close all healthy residents at home, as they did all over the world.
У нас на закрыть на локдаун, это значит...
To put everyone on lockdown in our country means letting the population die without any means. We cannot close borders and let people stay at home, just because A, we do not have such a developed internet, we cannot work from home online, and B, here, if people do not go out every day to earn the living, then the population will simply die here not from COVID, but from hunger.
Население умрет здесь не от ковида, а от голода.
The country has been slightly affected by the coronavirus. Not everyone followed primitive rules like clean hands, social distance, and face masks. My life hasn't changed in any way. I have a friend who suffered from malaria, but the coronavirus didn't affect me in any way. Life hasn't changed in any way. It's just that now we wear masks, that's all.
Alright, and one of them is that because of COVID, I have to do online studies. I'm not able to go back to school, which is in Ghana. I'm back to my country, Benin, and so far it's been kind of tough to have like studies online because
There is life in Benin even during COVID. This hotel opened at its peak last year and it's working successfully. And today they're opening a sushi bar. Well, you know yourself, if we had a lockdown, we would not have opened new hotels and sushi bars.
Ну, вы сами понимаете, да, если бы у нас был локдаун, у нас бы не открывались новые отели и суши-бары.
Despite the general calmness about COVID-19, the population is still being vaccinated in the country. By the way, even the tourists can get the vaccine. Here in Africa, they are well aware of the importance of timely immunization. Against the background of the coronavirus, which is on everyone's lips, people do not forget also about other diseases.
Да, наша семья переболела, и дети переболели.
Yes, our family got sick and the children got sick and I got sick, but it was like a 3-day flu. We did not experience any super scary symptoms. We didn't go to the hospital. They just drank aspirin and that's all. Well, chloroquine is prescribed here too. More because there are a lot of malaria diseases, and for malaria, quinine and chloroquine drugs are prescribed, which in principle constantly circulate in our blood because malaria is a more common disease here than the COVID. Therefore, for example, we have a lot of chloroquine in our access, and in just 2 days you get well even if you were sick with COVID.
В доступе очень много chloroquine, и он как раз за 2 дня на ноги ставит от ковида.
At the peak of the epidemic in Benin, they were fined for not wearing masks. The already poor population was more frightened by the punishment than by the virus itself. But since many people ride bikes and there is no public transport here, it was not easy to control even the wearing of masks.
Одним из самых неприятных моментов ковида как раз в Бенине это было...
One of the most unpleasant moments of the COVID in Benin was that we had to rebuild our style of behavior in society because this is a francophone Africa. We are a former colony of France, and here when people meet each other, they kiss, do bisous. Now, due to the fact that we need to maintain a social distance, we just do like this to each other when we meet, and we can't hug. And this somehow locked people down a little at first. Well, then everyone got used to it. There is nothing wrong with that.
Пила поначалу, ну и потом все привыкли, и в принципе ничего такого страшного там нет.
Benin is now open to all interested tourists. Other countries here are not identified as red, orange, or green on the basis of the epidemiological situation. The main condition for entry is the presence of a negative PCR test.